All right. Well, first, I would like to thank Lorna for inviting me to do this presentation. It's a great joy to share my road trips with you guys today. And during the pandemic, it's been great to bury myself in these photographs and remember where all I'd gotten to go. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen while let's see here, while I also thank Jonas, because Jonas has kept us all together during this pandemic, and I think that that has been just tremendous for him to do that. All right, and so here we go. You know that you can minimize the pictures here by just clicking the little negative sign at the top right of the screen. So about in 1970 something, I was driving to work one day, and the thought occurred to me that wouldn't it be great if I could just keep driving? So fast forward about 40 years, and when I retired, that's precisely what I did. I started taking road trips across the country. These road trips would last anywhere from 2.5 to 3 months, and I'd cover about 10 to 12,000 miles each time. A couple of years into the road trips, I started up with my photography, and the road trips became even more wonderful. So what I'd like to do today is share some of the places I've been and things I've seen. These are just things that caught my eye along the way. And then, okay, here we go. So the stars represent places that we'll stop this afternoon. And you can see we'll go all the way from Cadillac Mountain in Maine out to the far west point in the continental United States, Cape Flattery in Washington. So starting in Maine, the sunset over Cadillac Mountain in Maine is the first place in the United States that anyone sees the sunrise. And it's really beautiful, but it's cold and it's a long drive up there in the dark to get there by the time the sun goes up. I was there on a photographic workshop, and I found after the workshop ended that I could take nice sunrise pictures right from the balcony of Bar Harbor. And so I quit going to Cadillac Mountain and settled for this. One of the things that was important about this particular trip to Maine, this was in June of 2015, is this is when I started to get serious about photography, this particular trip. This is when I learned to start how to photograph water. And this is my very favorite thing to photograph. So this trip will always be dear to me. Lots of colorful things in Maine along the coast. Fishermen love colorful buoys, and of course there's nothing more colorful than your dinner lobster. We would get the lobsters right from the fishermen. It was quite a treat, absolutely delicious. Moving on to Vermont, sunrises there are every bit as spectacular as you could imagine. This color is not enhanced. This is what it looked like. Just absolutely beautiful. The colors there in the fall, the red barns, the red leaves, etc., are just outstanding. Here are reflections in the beautiful still pond. The maple trees just can't be beat in the fall. I love covered bridges, and there are a lot of them in New England. This is from the inside of a covered bridge. Moving on to upstate New York, they have more covered bridges there too. But what I really like to shoot in upstate New York are the waterfalls. Not only do I like to shoot the water itself, but in these particular waterfalls, I want you to notice the rocks along the side. I thought these were particularly interesting. All right, we're moving south now at rapid speed. We're in the Outer Banks, and there watching the sunrise is just a glorious pastime. It's worth it to get up really early in the morning there. And the beautiful pastels in the sky. And I love, almost as much as I love water, is I love to take pictures of clouds, interesting skies. And here's some skies over the sand dunes in the Outer Banks. And of course, lots of lighthouses there. Here's a token lighthouse for today. And one of the things I didn't know about was there's a small aquarium there. They had beautiful jellyfish with great colored lights. Moving on, we're going to go to one of my favorite places in the United States, and that's the Great Smoky Mountains. I'm embarrassed to say I hadn't been there until 3 years ago. Once I discovered the Smoky Mountains, I've been back probably 6 or 7 times since then. This is a morning in the fall when the trees weren't pretty at all, but this is right before sunrise, and you can see why they call it the Blue Ridge Mountains. This is the morning blue hour, and I'll show you some examples of the evening blue hour in a few minutes. But this was just a beautiful sight. You can see why they're called the Smokies. One of the park rangers said that there was a lady who came up to him one time and wanted to know what time they turned on the smoke machines so she wouldn't oversleep. That was incredible, but the smoke or the haze or the fog, the mist is just gorgeous there. So most of the mist is gone here, and here's sunrise over the mountains. And I love the water, again, in the Great Smoky Mountains, particularly in the spring or after a big rainfall. And it's beautiful whether it's in the spring or the fall. And of course, the fall there is just can't be beat. Lots of historic buildings, lots of history there, and there are reenactors, they're just very interesting people to talk to. Okay, we're going to make just a quick stop in Florida. I've been, most of my road trips I go by myself, but I've lived all over the country, so it's fun to visit friends. A friend from Connecticut and her husband had a home that was just right on the shore in Fort Myers Beach, and we would watch sunset every evening out on their beach. It was just gorgeous. But we're going to keep moving to Alabama, and here I'm lucky enough to have some cousins with a condominium on the beach, and this is their beach. I went out early my first morning there with my brand new camera, and this is what greeted me. And then a great blue heron flew in and joined me to watch the sunrise. But you don't need a dramatic sunrise to just to see beauty in nature in America. So many beautiful things if you just stop and look. So there's nothing going on here, just a slight reflection in the water, but this was just so peaceful. All right, heading to Mississippi. Mississippi is where I have a bunch of relatives. I usually spend Thanksgiving there with 50 relatives, except of course for this year I had to stay home. My cousins mostly live in Jackson, Mississippi, but they have a farm. One of them has a farm in Canton, and here is the pond on their farm just as the sun is getting ready to go down. Just a beautiful evening there. And the farm next door to them, this is the entryway to that farm, and I saw these trees, and it was just a lovely sight. All right, so Mule Jail is in the confines of Jackson, Mississippi. Mule Jail is an oxbow lake, and that's a lake that's been cut off. It's a curve in the river that gets cut off from the flowing river. And in the middle of Mule Jail is an island, and the story goes that during the Civil War, the Confederate soldiers put all of their farm animals and service animals on this island in Mule Jail to keep them protected so that the Union soldiers wouldn't either kill them or steal them. And so that's the story. The Mule Jail itself is a swampy area with beautiful cypress trees and alligators. My cousin's husband volunteered to take me on a little boat ride. We were in a tiny boat tooling down the river so I could take pictures of these beautiful trees. It was quite a ride, but every time we'd bump against anything, we'd be worried that it might be an alligator. All right, Oklahoma. I grew up in Tulsa, and I know some of you also got to live in Tulsa or some other place in Oklahoma. I'm always amazed at how, whereas Tulsa was the oil capital of the world when I was growing up, nowadays you see at least as many wind turbines and probably more than you do oil pumping jacks when you drive through the state. Tulsa is known for its architecture. What happened is when all the oil barons were living there, particularly the Phillips brothers of Phillips 66 fame, they developed downtown Tulsa into an absolutely beautiful place with wonderful architecture. I had to take these pictures with an iPhone during my 50th high school reunion a few years ago. And so I can't wait to go back with my big camera and really shoot the architecture of these places. But it's just so interesting and beautiful there. And it's been well preserved. All right, now we're out on the Oklahoma Panhandle. For anybody who's wondered where no man's land is, well, this is it. And it is pretty barren out there. I do want you to notice that red clay. This is one of the reasons why Oklahoma was a very poor state until the oil boom, because you can't grow anything on this red clay that's all throughout the state. All right, so these flowers are important to me, and I'll always remember them because I had pulled off the road in no man's land onto this red clay, just horrible little road, because I needed to take picture of these flowers. When I got back to my car, which is probably 10 feet behind me, I noticed that, by golly, it had sunk right into that clay over the rims of my back tires. And thankfully, I had all-wheel drive, and it took quite a while because there's not much traffic going on out there, but I got myself out, and I'll always remember these flowers. Here I am leaving no man's land. This great truck driver. I got to chat with him for a little bit, but this was about as much traffic as I saw the whole time I was on the Panhandle. Okay, we're just going to stop for a second in Colorado. I've been to Colorado, particularly Aspen and Denver, a whole lot, but that was before I was a photographer, and someday I have to go back there. There's so many places I need to go back, but I want to take more pictures of Aspen, particularly in the fall. I just love these trees, and of course the mountains. So anyway, I'm hoping to do a fall trip out there sometime soon. New Mexico is beautiful, and when I first get over the border of New Mexico, I just pull the car over and just revel in the beautiful sky, the clouds and the deep blue of the sky. They're also beautiful rock formations, and they're very interesting. They have funny, not funny, but interesting shapes, and to go with these shapes, there are all sorts of Indian legends. You can see with this rock formation, you can make out a face here, a face here, a face, and more faces, and there are Indian legends to go with each of these, quote, people. Lots of beautiful churches in New Mexico as well, and there's one very famous church made famous by Georgia O'Keeffe, and this is the St. Francis of Assisi Church, and it's in Ranchos de Taos, New Mexico. It's just south of the town of Taos, New Mexico. And this is the front of it, and the front of it's lovely, but what is really striking about this church is the back. This is a painting by Georgia O'Keeffe of this church, and here are some of the photographs I got. I was standing behind the church photographing it, just loving it, and a tourist came up to me and said, "You realize the front of the church is over there?" And I kind of laughed and told him what the story was, and then he got it. I also want to point out the beautiful blue color here in the doors and windows and trim. Lots of this particular blue, which just matches the blue in the sky all throughout New Mexico. Moving right on west, we're heading west to Arizona. Now, I had passed the exit to the Painted Desert and Petrified Forest many times, but I'd never stopped. And then some friends in Tulsa told me, "Gee, you just have to stop." What it is about a 20-25 mile loop right off the highway. It's very, very convenient. And so I pulled off to see what the deal was, and you see why they call it the Painted Desert. Beautiful, desolate countryside. And here's some of the colors up close. It was a really remarkable place. Now I make a point to stop every time. And you'll note that the sky and clouds here are pretty much the same as in New Mexico, just gorgeous. All right, so as we pass the Painted Desert on this same road, we make it to the Petrified Forest. This is on the old Route 66. Thankfully, our vehicles are a little bit more modern nowadays, and it's a little bit easier to travel through this countryside. Not only are there petrified trees, but there are petroglyphs. It was difficult to photograph them because you have to hang over a balcony and try to make them out. But with some of my zoom lenses, I was able to get this. But really remarkable petroglyphs that are very old. All right, further on, we come to the Grand Canyon, and my favorite time to go there is in the early morning. The light is just beautiful. Now you're going to notice that the Grand Canyon actually changes colors as the light changes. Here it's yellow-orange kind of. You'll notice how big the canyon is when you take a look at these tiny people standing here on the ledge. And here on a different day, you can see with purple clouds, the canyon itself turned kind of an orange. So I had to take a detour through Arizona to get to my car dealer to get my car fixed. And so I just happened to pass the exit for Sedona, Arizona, and I pulled in, and man, was I delighted. Just a friendly town that's absolutely gorgeous. You'll notice the sky again, the beautiful rock formations. Clearly, I've got to spend more than a couple of hours there next trip. And that detour, the same detour, took me also near Joshua Tree, and I had to stop in there. Very desolate desert conditions and absolutely breathtakingly beautiful. The Joshua trees, there's something about them that's just magical, and I just love them. You'll notice also there are a lot of rock formations, and some of the rock formations were huge, and this is a rock climber's paradise. Lots of people come and climb here. We'll talk about rock climbing more in a minute at Yosemite. So leaving Joshua Tree, we get to now, hands down, my favorite place in the United States, and that's Yosemite National Park. Here's Half Dome. I'm sure that most of you have seen it up close and personal. For those of you who haven't, you've probably seen postcards or other pictures, because this is one of the iconic images of Yosemite. Everywhere you look in Yosemite, there's something beautiful. Here are reflections of that waterfall. And what I really love is the soft, fluffy fog and mist around the hard granite walls. The granite there is just, it's just majestic, is all I can say. Huge granite walls. And sometimes they just peek out of the top of the fog. Here's a sunrise. You can't see the sun itself, but you can see the beams just shining on the trees in this canyon. And here again is sunrise. The sun is rising from right over here, shining on these trees and reflecting in the water. I really loved enjoying this scene one morning, even though I was freezing to death. Here's an example of a burn in Yosemite. Yosemite is one of the first places to use controlled burn to help prevent forest fires. And I'm showing you this image instead of the devastating, huge wildfires that have struck there in the last few years, to show you how once the burn has happened, there's regrowth and it's less dense, and that helps protect against future forest fires. So there is hope after a forest fire. It just takes many years to recover. All along the way in Yosemite, you'll see little surprises. This is a moss rose. Sometimes it's known as a 10 o'clock. And it was just a beautiful, perky little thing one day. I love stopping in the Ansel Adams Gallery, certainly to see his work, but also to see the gift shop, to buy books, buy souvenirs, and to see the work of other great photographers. In particular, one of them is William Neal, who has been a mentor to me. Last time I was there in the spring of 2019, because obviously I had to cancel for this year, I got to do a one-on-one tour of Yosemite with him from 5:30 in the morning till 8:30 at night. It was just magical to have somebody who's lived in Yosemite for the last 44 years take me around. He was also the official photographer for the Ansel Adams Gallery for many years. And you meet all sorts of other kinds of people in Yosemite. This is at Tunnel View. I'm sure many of you have been there. This is one of the most famous places to take pictures in Yosemite. And the sun wasn't going to rise very well here because it was so cloudy that day, and all the photographers, usually it's tripod to tripod here, but everybody had left because it was clear we're not going to get a good sunrise. But this guy and I stood around and chatted for quite a while. One of the things I love to do in Yosemite is to take pictures of the dogwoods. I actually time my trips to Yosemite to try to match it up with peak dogwood season, which is right at the end of April, beginning of May. And I love to hang over the bridges or just hang out over the water and try to capture these beautiful flowers. All right, so this is every bit as dangerous as it looks. These guys are up on this ledge, and what is beneath them here is, well, it's nothing. These guys clowned around, they took selfies, they danced, posed, etc. I was so dizzy I didn't get many good shots of them because I just couldn't stand to look, as a matter of fact, because if they fell, nothing was going to save them. But talk about dangerous. We've got El Capitan, and El Capitan is right here. It's a beautiful place, but it's also a very dangerous rock climbing place. 25 people have fallen from their deaths trying to climb this peak. Some of you may be familiar with the fact that in 2017, a guy named Alex Honnold climbed this peak with no ropes. All he used was his hands and his feet. And they made a movie of it, which won the Academy Award for the documentary film of the year in 2018. I should note that his mother has set the record for the oldest woman to climb El Cap. She did it at age 66. She, of course, used ropes. But I still think that's pretty amazing. Again, water in Yosemite is just gorgeous, particularly in the springtime. Sometimes in the fall it's all dried out, but in the spring when I go, there's beautiful water flowing, and here you can see the upper and lower Yosemite Falls and all the mist that these falls generate. More waterfalls. I just love photographing water, as you have heard. This is underneath Bridal Veil Falls. And as I was getting ready to leave Yosemite the last time I was there, it was just at sunset. And this is, again, taken from the tunnel view area. And you can't see sunset here very well because it happens right behind all this granite. But just as I was packing up my tripod, getting ready to leave, just a little blush came over the clouds, and it was kind of like it was wishing me goodbye. When I leave Yosemite after being there for 2 or 3 weeks, I need to kind of come down. Yosemite is so stimulating and so magical that I actually need to recover from the experience. I almost cry driving out of Yosemite every time I leave. I love it so much. But I drive across beautiful countryside from Yosemite to the Pacific Ocean. And here's some of the beautiful countryside I pass by. California is just gorgeous. And here is a field of sweet peas that a photographer on the coast in Cambria, California, pointed me to. Anybody who knows about sweet peas knows how beautiful they smell. So here I was just after dawn, standing in this field of flowers. It was just a magical morning. When I get to the coast in Cambria, one of the things that I allow myself is to get a massage from a wonderful massage therapist there. And she's an old hippie, and every time I pull into her yard, I see different kinds of interesting stuff. Along the coast in California, you'll see a lot of beautiful California poppies. They are this exact shade of orange, if not brighter. They're very difficult to photograph because they're very flimsy, and since they're mostly along the coast, they blow a lot in the wind, so it's hard to get them to hold still, but I just dearly love them. Also along the coast, as you start driving north from Cambria, you run into the elephant seals at this preserve. Here I am standing on a ledge with a million other tourists looking down on these beasts. They are the laziest looking things you can imagine. They kind of flop around, they're so fat. And not only do you get to see the sights, but they smell terrible, absolutely terrible. And they're screaming at the top of their lungs, making absolutely rude noises. It's quite an experience, and as miserable as it is, I always have to stop and see these guys. Then I get to Big Sur, which I just love. This is at Pfeiffer Beach. There's nothing like the beautiful waves at Big Sur. It's just, again, another kind of magical experience. Just in the northern part of Big Sur, you come to the famous Bigsby Creek Bridge. I'm sure you've seen TV commercials and this bridge in movies, etc. I also want to point to the water and what a beautiful color it is this particular day. The water of the Pacific Ocean changes colors constantly, and I'm always amazed. You'll see some other different colors that we'll see, particularly on the Oregon beaches. And as you drive up the coast, there is this beautiful patch of ground cover and California poppies that somebody tends. I don't know who does this, but it is just a pleasure to see, and I always have to stop. And on this particular day, you can see that the fog was coming in. Over to the right is the Pacific Coast Highway, Highway 101, which is simply 2 lanes running here, and then just beyond it is the ocean. So you're right on the Pacific Ocean here, and but it's a must stop for me as I come up the coast. All right, now we've gone way far north. We bypassed San Francisco, and we're way up north in Redwood country. Those of you who saw my presentation on forest bathing I've seen a lot of these slides before, but I just had to show them again. I love trees, as you know. So this was a morning when I was getting up early to go photograph sunrise in the Redwoods, and I'm standing in my hotel parking lot, and by golly, this is what I see. So I, put up my tripod and just started shooting right in the parking lot next to my car. It was just a beautiful morning to see the sunbeams coming through these redwoods. Then I went driving about 20 miles to get to the Lady Bird Johnson Redwood Grove, which is absolutely beautiful. It's a jewel of a redwood grove. Here I am. I'm almost always the first one to arrive unless somebody spent the night in the parking lot. And it's a little spooky, but it's kind of fun to be alone in the redwoods with all the peace. And the only problem is just as I get ready to enter the bridge, there's a big sign saying, "Beware of bears." So I do always kind of think twice, but then I just keep going. So after I cross this bridge, this is the scene that welcomes me. It's always just like being home. You can see how big the trees are. They're particularly beautiful in the morning fog. And I showed you this during the other presentation. It's redwood sorrel that covers the floor of redwood forest. I just love it. It's so bright and perky. Also in the springtime you'll see trillium, and of course trillium comes in purple and yellow and pink and white, but my very favorite are white trillium. So I go past the Lady Bird Johnson Grove and I come to this beautiful area with lupin all along the way, and in some years there are huge fields of lupin that you see. This is kind of a cliff here, right over the cliff. Now the problem with this is that it's very foggy on this particular day, and I'm driving this way from Lady Bird Johnson, and the fog just gets so dense I can't see a thing, literally. And this gets to be very dangerous because coming from the other direction down here are these huge logging trucks that tend to come out for some reason early in the morning, and they are driving at breakneck speed on this terrible little 2-lane road. And so when it's really foggy, I figured the better part of valor was to just turn around and try it a different day. Also lots of elk in redwood country, and this particular day I was taking these photos of these elk. They were just kind of eating and playing with their babies and things, and just a few yards this way was Highway 101, which again here, when you talk about highways along the coast, it's just a 2-lane road actually, and there is a loud noise, and what had happened is one of those logging trucks had come whizzing by, trying to whiz by, but a bunch of elk had run out in front of it, and it slammed on its brakes. Everybody was fine. The driver wasn't hurt, the elk weren't hurt, but there were logs everywhere. It was quite a scene. Okay, this is a different redwood place. There are all sorts of redwood forests, and here's a dear friend looking up at one of them. And near there is another special tiny little terrible road that you drive up to get to the Remembrance Grove, which is very special. It's one of the most peaceful places I've ever found. Here is another little road I came across by accident. The whole road is less than half a mile long, and in the morning when I go, there's nobody on it. I tend to go a little later, so I hit Lady Bird and some of the others at like 6 o'clock in the morning, but by 9:30 the sun starts coming through the trees here, and it's really lovely. And here are the kinds of photographs I get along here. All right, so if you'll remember forest bathing, you know that these redwoods need lots of fog to feed them water. And this fog is coming right off the Pacific Ocean. These are called coastal redwoods because they're close to the coast. And here you can see coming right off the ocean is this fog early in the morning. And here's the fog over the redwoods, feeding them, nourishing them. So I'm standing up on a rise to get those two photographs. And then if I come, this is in the morning when the fog is out, and in the afternoon it clears, and standing in the same place, just turning a little to my right, I got this photo, this with the light shining through the clouds and reflecting on the ocean. I call this Zen. And more fog further north as I go up the coast. And here I'm going on a terrible little, about 6 or 8 mile road into a place called Stout Grove, which again is arguably one of the most beautiful redwood groves in the world. And this particular morning, all of a sudden these sunbeams came through the trees while I was driving along. So I pulled over and captured just a beautiful scene. Once I'm in Stout Grove, there are beautiful paths. These paths are much smoother than the roads you have to drive in order to get there. And of course, lots of ferns in the redwoods. And when you look up, this is what you see. And besides the redwoods, there are lots of other kinds of plants and trees in the understory growing underneath the redwoods. I particularly like this little path with the afternoon sun coming through. And just as I'm leaving, I run into this elk on the coast, just as I'm leaving redwood country. So now we're in Oregon. We've driven north, right, just a few miles beyond Stout Grove. We are in Oregon, and people in Oregon claim that their beaches are more beautiful than California beaches. Their coast is more beautiful. I don't know about that, but I know they're both phenomenal places. It can be pretty wild and woolly, but I also love the beaches like Bandon. I think Bandon is my favorite place to go in Oregon. And so here I'm at an overlook, and over to my left are some stairs, and you climb down the stairs so you can actually be standing out here in the middle of what are called haystacks, these stacks. And this particular year, one of the years I was there, they had record low tides, and so you're able to get right out amongst the stacks and stay out there for hours photographing, and it was just quite a scene. Coming down the stairs to get to the stacks, I ran into this little flower, just a perfect little flower right there on the staircase. And I love to take pictures of the water coming in and going out. I was happy to see starfish here because a lot of the starfish in Northern California have died out in recent years. They're beginning to come back. I don't know how they did this year, but it was great to see a lot of healthy starfish on the Oregon coast. And there's a beautiful lighthouse here in Bandon. And this is the path to another beach in Bandon. And beautiful sea anemone, really healthy crop here. And one morning I go out and I park right up here, and then here are the stairs that I was talking about that I walk down to the beach. And one morning at about 6 or 6:30, when I like to arrive, there was a guy with a rake raking the beach, and I said, "What are you doing?" And it turns out he has started a project called Circles in the Sand. And at low tide, he creates mazes that people can walk along. And here's a picture from up above. And he greets you right here, gives you pretty little sea rocks that I still have my little rocks that he's given me. And then you walk the maze. It's a huge, unbelievably peaceful experience. Then, of course, when the tide comes in, the maze disappears. And then he does it again. He's done hundreds of these. All right, so here's a scene that I really liked, but there was something wrong with it. I loved the fact that the water was flowing around these rocks, but it wasn't showing up the way I wanted it to. And what I did was I converted it so that you could see, my viewers could see the kinds of things I was really seeing. Edgar Degas once said, "Art is not what you see, but what you make others see. And so by converting this photograph to black and white, I could make my viewers see what I wanted them to see, which was the water swirling here and the reflections in the water. By the way, that my next portfolio project that I'm going to start in the next week or so is on more conversions of water photos to black and white. I really love doing that. And here's that lighthouse from a different angle. More of healthy starfish and sea anemone. And here's a day when, like I mentioned, the ocean turns all sorts of different colors. Here was a day when the sky and the ocean were a perfect blue. And you'll see this again in a minute at another beach. Doesn't happen real often. Then in the late afternoon, once in a while, you get a kind of turquoise color. And here, of course, since we're on the Pacific Ocean, it's a great place to see sunsets. I always try to stick around after the sun has gone down. I showed you the morning blue hour in the Smokies, and here's an example of the evening blue hour. And sometimes I can get some great photos during this beautiful, peaceful time when almost everybody has gone in. And so it's very quiet on the beach. So we're going to go up the coast now, and there are just a million lighthouses and places to pull out, and I'm afraid we're going to have to bypass those. Here's another famous lighthouse, and again you can see the color of the ocean is just magical that day. And here is one of my favorite places to stop. Those of you who've gone to the Oregon coast know about Moe's. This is a kind of a family, very casual seafood restaurant, and they've got, fortunately, several branches, and I've probably hit all, if not all, almost all, if not all of them, all over the coast of Oregon. Fortunately, this day I was starving to death, and there was a parking place right in front of it, and that was excellent. I should also note that if you cross the street right behind us here is an ice cream parlor for dessert. So this is a great stop in Florence, Oregon. Further north in Newport, there's a beautiful bridge, and I got up and took a sunrise photo one morning there, and then in the late afternoon from the other side of the bridge, you get this kind of view. Moving farther north up the coast, again you can see that the ocean's decided to turn a whole different color. This day it was bright sunshine and gorgeous turquoise water. And here is Devil's Punch Bowl, which is a favorite place to stop. And not just because there's a Moe's in the parking lot, but I really love seeing this particular water element. The water's always very busy here, and I just really enjoy seeing Devil's Punch Bowl. All right, so now we're up at Cannon Beach, which is my second favorite beach in Oregon, and this is a beautiful place. I should note that right over here is a Moe's, and then right across the street from that is my hotel. So I literally roll out of bed in the morning, I can hop over to the beach and just be here. It is just very handy. And so if I look to my left, this is a scene I saw one day with a beautiful cloud formation, and when you turn to my right, this is the view I got. And here's another one of those crystal blue days. I love days where there's haze and fog and mist over the ocean. And here's what these starfish are used for by the seagulls. And you can see here, like in Bandon, just very delicate sunsets. And the blue hour happens again. And after the sun is down, these are a bunch of campfires along the beach. And walking back to my hotel, the smell was just outrageously wonderful. All right, so we've left the coast and are at Tillamook, Oregon, which is not far from Cannon Beach, and I always have to make a small detour to get to the Tillamook Creamery. They have the best grilled cheese sandwiches in the world. I'm sure many of you have seen Tillamook cheese. I know it's in Safeway, and I'm sure it's other stores around, but they do cheese and ice cream and other dairy products. This is not a big corporation. What it is a cooperative of dairy farmers. And just in the last few years, they've built this huge building that houses a museum and gift shop, and of course a cafeteria and ice cream shop, etc. But it's a great place to stop, and I never miss this when I'm in Oregon. So now we're going to keep going further north to get to the Olympic Peninsula in Washington. And right here along the coast, you can see I'm off-roading again. I like these little roads like this because that leads me to some of the most beautiful, peaceful, scenic sites that I ever find. Here is Cape Flattery, Washington. As I mentioned at the very beginning, this is the westernmost part of the continental United States. So when I'm standing here, the only things west of me in America are Hawaii and Alaska. This is Hurricane Ridge, which is on the Olympic Peninsula, and what you do is you drive up this mountain, and at the top, you never know what you're going to see. You can see the park ranger at the bottom, and she'll say all clear, or heavy snow, or heavy fog, and when you get to the top, it's just something totally different. On this particular day, there was just beautiful fog, but I've been up there on days when it's clear, and you can see just all around the Olympic Peninsula. The sights are amazing. And one other time I was up there when it was perfectly clear, and suddenly out of nowhere there's a blizzard, and I had trouble getting back down the mountain. Lots of beaches along the Olympic Peninsula. I particularly love the Ruby Beach. So you climb down to the beach, and when you get down here, you get to climb over all sorts of logs, etc. to get here. You look off to the left, and as the sun is setting, there's just kind of a blush in the sky. And looking off to the right is where the sun is setting. These two people are two Italian photographers that I kept running into. I was on the Olympic Peninsula for quite a while, and every day, no matter where I went, these two people would be, and it was great fun. They were interesting photographers. It was kind of fun to meet them. I like this image because here the reflection looks almost like stained glass windows. All right, also on the Olympic Peninsula, of course, you have the rainforest, and this is the famous Hoh rainforest. It's absolutely gorgeous. These greens are not touched up. This is the way it looks. The paths through here are so interesting. You never know what you're going to see around the corner. Little bodies of water, of course, since there's so much rain. And sometimes beautiful waterfalls. All right, we're going to spend just a minute in the Columbia Gorge in Oregon. For those of you who don't know what the Columbia Gorge is, here is Washington State, here is Oregon, and right in between runs the Columbia River, and all along here is called the Columbia River Gorge. And I just wanted to show you a couple of things quickly. One is you've heard about the devastating wildfires, and there were some really bad ones right along the Columbia Gorge and in central Oregon. This is what was left after one of the forest fires. It's just awful because I'm so used to going to Oregon and seeing it be so lush and green, and then to see it just burn down like this was awful. And then here is one of my favorite things to see along the gorge, and that's Multnomah Falls. This fall is 620 feet tall. It's the equivalent of about a 44 to 50 story building. It's absolutely gorgeous. All right, now we're going to head into Washington State again, but instead of being along the coast, we're going to head to the eastern part of the state. And here we are driving into eastern Washington, right up through from the gorge. Just a couple of miles off the gorge is this site, and this is the Mary Hill Stonehenge. Many years ago, there was a little town here, and a rich man built Stonehenge for his wife, and then eventually the town kind of went away, and this is all that's left, and it literally is in the middle of nowhere. Further on into Washington, in the southeast corner, is an area called the Palouse, and this is a farming territory that's also a big draw for photographers. It is an absolutely beautiful countryside. You can see that it's very hilly. And you can see the hills again here. The farms are just really picturesque. It's just gorgeous. And the farmers are very welcoming to photographers as long as you respect their land and their rights and don't trespass. They actually make turnouts for photographers. They're really friendly there. What they do is they farm wheat. This is very rich farmland. And these hills are what happened after glaciers and lots of silt came through over the millennia. And they grow lots of wheat, in particular, lots of barley, and lots of canola and in these fields. Now, it was very dangerous to farm them because you can see that if they had a tractor on these hills, the tractors would tip over, and it was really bad news until one of the Palouse farmers actually created a combine that balances the tractors so that they don't tip over. These farmers, I consider some beautiful artists. The farms are just works of art as far as I'm concerned. This is a canola farm. They also have a lot of old barns there, and I like this one because of poppies. I'm a sucker for any kind of poppy, as you've already figured out. And right across from this barn was a little poppy field. I wasn't too happy with these poppies, and so what I did is I played with the camera and did what's called intentional camera motion, and by twirling my lens, I came out with this. Once again, I'm helping you see what I want you to see here, and that's the glory of these little poppies. The farmers are proud and they like to show off for the photographers and have great scenes like this all lined up for us. And here is a cloud day, if you ever saw one. Beautiful farm, and these clouds were just, you couldn't pay for clouds that were more beautiful than these this particular day. And this farm has been remodeled by a bunch of artists, and so this has artists workshops, and they also do a lot of teaching, and there's a gift shop. It's a great place to visit if you're ever in the Palouse. Right, just so that we give Idaho equal credit, part of the Palouse area stretches into Idaho, and they have interesting sights to see as well. And I particularly love this canola field. All right, we're in Glacier National Park now, and we're at Lake McDonald, which is crystal clear glacier water. And here you can see right through the water. It's just as clear as can be. Looking in the other direction on Lake McDonald, you see beautiful reflections of clouds. And there are a lot of water sports on these lakes. But what you don't see, I want to point out, is there's not much in the way of glaciers anymore. I was lucky enough to get to see beargrass when I was there. This is beargrass is in the lily family, and I was told by both the park rangers and some other visitors there who introduced me to it that beargrass is only blooms every 7 years, so I was particularly lucky to get to see a lot of it this year. But when I looked it up, I found that beargrass blooms when the conditions are good, and so it could bloom every year or every 10 years. It just depends. It just so happened that I was lucky enough to be there on a good year. That was Lake McDonald's in the western part of Glacier, and as I drove around the southern part, I drove over this stream, and it had rafters. Again, like I said, lots of water sports here, and you'll notice the color of the water is this kind of has this greenish aqua tinge because of the minerals from the glacier melt. And here we are at St. Mary Lake, which is a famous lake. I'm sure even if you've not been to Glacier, you've probably seen a picture of this lake. You can always recognize it by Wild Goose Island, which is right out in the middle. Once again, you see that there's not much in the way of glaciers anymore. So this was in the spring of 2019. Because I couldn't go this year, I doubt that there'll be nearly as much snow by the time I get there the next time. And you go up the Going to the Sun Road in Glacier, you see all sorts of great water elements. And in this particular one, the water was beautiful, but what I particularly loved was these rocks were everywhere. I just loved the brilliant colors, and I just took lots of pictures of those. And here's Mount Jackson, and this is supposed to be the Jackson Glacier, what's left of it here. All right, now we're in the home stretch. We're at Yellowstone National Park, and I love stopping in there and seeing the beautiful geothermal elements, hydrothermal elements. I should point out that the mist coming off of this hot spring is very acidic, so I have to be very careful and carefully wipe down all my gear as soon as I leave so that it's not damaged, because this is very irritating. You don't want to fall into these. As you probably know, they're very hot and they're very acidic, and so people who fall in don't get out. You have to be very careful on this crusty type area as well, because you never know how thick it is. You can fall right through into one of the hot springs underneath. These are what's called bobby socks trees. And what happens, these are dead lodgepole pines, and when they absorb water from the ground, the water has lots of minerals, and when the water dries up, they're left with these things that look like bobby socks around the bottoms of their trunks. Here I just want to point out that it's wonderful to hike in Yellowstone, but you have to keep to the paths when you're anywhere near the geothermal elements, and you have to stay on these paths. You never know, but what this might be, very thin crust, and you could fall right through. But there are a lot of nice paths, and even more rugged paths. A lot more rugged than this too, but I'm kind of a sissy. Lots of water in Yellowstone too, and as you know, I love my water. Everywhere I turned this year, there were beautiful waterfalls. All right, so we get to a point in my road trips, and usually that's around 2.5 months away from home. I need to get home. And I don't necessarily call it homesickness, but all of a sudden I just need to be home. So I just drive as hard as I can and get home. And it sure is sweet to be here. But even as much as I miss my road trips when I'm here, I have to keep reminding myself there are lots of beautiful places here in Washington for us as well, even though we're stuck in the pandemic. And I'll close with that. Thank you very much.
Hello. Hello.
Thank you. That was great.
Hello. Hello.
Hi.
I just want to say, can you hear me?
Hang on just a second. I'm getting out of here. Okay, now I can.
Okay. I just want to say, you have provided me with another reason. I have a few, but another reason to love my country one more time. Because you have given me a wonderful perspective, not only about things that I know, but things I don't know, and across the entire United States. I am so pleased. Thank you so much. I'm really appreciative.
You sure are welcome.
Okay, well, I really enjoyed that as well. And there's a few questions coming in. And if anyone else has any questions, feel free to type them into the chat or just read them off. We're almost out of time, so I'll do it nice and quickly. I had a quick one. What is number one on your list of places to go to that you haven't been to for post-pandemic times?
I really want to see the Northern Lights sometimes. I think that's probably the number one thing on my bucket list. But I'll tell you, I need to get back to Yosemite. You know, I'm just hungry for that. I have reservations in May, but I think it's going to be at least fall before it's going to be safe to travel again.
Yes, I had a question came in. All these pictures look perfect. How many do you take at a particular site until you get the shot you come up with you featured in the presentation?
Oh, well, let's put it this way. I've been serious about photography for 5 years now, and I have 260 some odd thousand photos. I take a lot, in other words, wherever I go. And a lot of that is because I'm at places where I won't be able to come back to for at least another year. I'll stay in Yosemite for 2 or 3 weeks, and I'll stay on the Oregon coast for a couple of weeks, and I'll check my photos every evening. But it's not till I get home that I can really study them. So I take lots of extras just to be sure.
Right. How much do you walk on each of these trips? It seems like good exercise. How many miles?
I don't have any idea how much I walk. I do, I'm out usually from before dawn until the sun sets each day. So it's very, very strenuous days. A lot of it's driving. I have bad knees, and so I can't hike in really, hard areas. I have to be on pretty near parking lots and stuff like that. But there is a fair amount of walking. The hard part is carrying the camera gear, of course, too. Other questions?
Does anyone on the videos have a question?
Yes, where did you spend the nights?
I stay in hotels. I'm not, I don't have a background in camping. And I'm usually by myself unless I'm staying with friends or relatives. And so I stay in hotels along the way.
How do you photograph the water, the waterfalls?
Well, what you want to do is you want to slow down your shutter speed so that the water gets to look very nice and silky. And I think shooting water is my very favorite thing to do. And I'm going to work on water pictures all this next spring, I think.
Lynn, may I ask, have you made any new friends from your trips? Do you keep in touch with the Italian photographers?
I don't. That was so nice that we would run into each other. I have no idea what their names are. They don't know my name. And there were so many different things to do on the Olympic Peninsula, but for some reason, we always ended up at the same place the next day. It was really weird. But I have, we didn't get to know each other in particular. But there are a few people I keep in touch with that I met along the way, but not that many. These trips for me are getting away from it all. And one trip I did visit 29 friends and relatives, saw 8 national parks, went to a wedding, went to etc. But most of the time, I need this time to be by myself in nature. It's very healing to me.
Lynn,
I'm not sure about, maybe you said this, but your background was totally different from what you're doing now.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I didn't get into photography until after I retired. And I started in June of 2015 is when I got into photography when I was at that workshop, the photographic workshop in Maine. Before that, yeah, I did totally different stuff.
Okay, I'm just asking, what was your,
I'm a pediatrician. I specialized in pediatric infectious disease. And
Yeah.
I did that for about 20 years. And then I spent about 20 years doing health policy related issues.
Lynn, the only city you photographed was the city you grew up in, right? Are there other cities you have found beautiful, or do you really focus only on nature?
Oh, there are many, many beautiful cities. But I focus on nature. I need to be out in nature.
I was so struck by the beautiful architectural photographs that I wonder if you ever want to do a whole series of those.
Well, thank you very much. Those, like I mentioned, were simply iPhone shots during my 50th high school reunion, a little tour. And I knew that we had some people interested in Art Deco and stuff in the village. So I showed those quickly. I can see Burke shaking her head. Someday she'll want to get to Tulsa. We need to get to Tulsa to do a tour. But anyway, that's why I showed some of those.
I have a question. You seemed quite relaxed around the elk. Are they kind of calm around people, or?
No, you have to stay back. I was using a Zoom lens, so I was.
Oh, you're on a Zoom. Okay.
I was on a Zoom, yeah. So I was relatively close, but I heavily respect that. People have died from getting run over by elk and bison, of course, and stuff like that.
Lynn, this is Barb. And you can hear me? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Other than photography questions. I'm so impressed with your presentation, the economy of your words, the way you establish a pace and a time for each picture, because you already know people can see and observe that pretty fast. And you really maximize so much. And my question is, did you already know that from years of professional work? Did you learn it in a photography workshop to make presentations? Sometimes people are amazing, but they fail at the presentation part. And I'm really awestruck with how much you can see, do, and say, and your heartfelt love comes through in just 60 minutes. Bravo. So how did you learn that?
I was in academic medicine, so I was always, a professor at medical schools and things like that. And I've probably given hundreds, if not thousands, of talks over the years all over the world. So I've had to put together presentations for many, many years.
Yeah.
So it's a joy to be able to share my love of these places with you.
Well, thank you.
Can you tell us about the cameras that you like best, please?
I'm a Nikon shooter, so I have a Nikon D850 right now, and I had a couple of other Nikons before that. Remember, I've been doing this about 5 years, so I particularly like Nikon. There are a lot of mirrorless cameras that are lighter weight, and so my next camera will be a Nikon that is a mirrorless camera that doesn't weigh as much, so I don't have to lug around as heavy gear.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
One that came in, I'll do this the last one because we're running out of time here, but there is a question on, do you have any lessons or the main takeaway from Ansel Adams and your stops over there?
Well, my main takeaways are from Bill Neal, who was one of his students, William Neal, who's this guy who's lived in and around Yosemite for 44 years and who is a mentor to me. And that is to not care what anybody thinks about your photography. You do what you like and what is good for you, and don't care about what other people say about your photographs, that it's this, that, or the other. You just photograph for yourself and you'll be successful.
Is there a particular reason you started in Maine?
Well, there was a workshop there. I had not been to Acadia in many years. I lived in Connecticut a long time ago and used to go visit Acadia. But all of a sudden, when I was thinking I was interested in photography, there was a workshop in Maine, and I looked up the instructors, and they didn't look like axe murderers. And
Sorry.
and it was just a treat, and that's where I got turned on to water photography and got serious about my photography that month.